Welcome to No Nonsense Nonprofits. Hi, I'm Sandy Ray, founder of Sandra E. Ray, where we alleviate financial headaches so that you can create a bigger impact. Today, we're going to talk about conflict of interest for nonprofits. Now, a conflict of interest exists when a member of the board or key employee has a personal interest that may influence making decisions. That's all it is. We're going to talk about the different types of conflict of interest and what we can do about it. Now, much of the focus on conflict of interest has to do about financial interests, and that's really important. But there are also other sources of conflicts, for example, family and business relationships. And then, of course, any conflict, potential conflict, is just that. It's potential. It's a perception. Some people are better at others than compartmentalizing and are able to make decisions, but still, just the appearance of a conflict of interest can be a problem for your organization. So we want to avoid as many of these conflicts as we possibly can. But of course, we are not going to filter out all of the conflict of interest, and some of them may be so insignificant we don't have to worry about them, but we want to talk about how to mitigate that as well. So the first step in managing our conflict of interest is developing a policy. Now, a policy is just a written document that communicates the purpose of the policy, and in this case, it's transparency for the organization. We need a statement of commitment and understanding by each board member that requires disclosure of their potential conflicts and requires a new disclosure every year. I really think that's the best way to go, is to this annually. So we have one board meeting a year where we talk about conflict of interest disclosure statements. We have a committee that reviews those disclosure statements, and then action is taken and discussed at that board meeting. And like I said, the policy is also going to describe the appropriate course of action if any conflicts exist. It may be as simple as this board member needs to pull themselves out of the meeting during a vote or discussion on any topic that they may have a conflict or a perceived conflict. And from time to time, there may be disputes. So the policy needs to discuss how those are resolved as well. Now, to manage conflicts, there's several things that we can do in addition to the policy, and that has to do with the composition of our board members. We want to have a very diverse, large enough board member group that brings in all the viewpoints to the conversation. So we don't want the board so big that we don't get anything done, but we don't want it so small that we don't have enough viewpoints for the organization to really discuss and make sure that we're covering all of our bases. We don't want to allow anyone on our board who has a significant conflict. That just saves so much time and energy, and say thank you. Maybe this person can volunteer in another way, but not as a board member. We want to be proactive in addressing issues before they escalate. Discussion of the conflict of interest policy with potential board members is a wonderful way to say, hey, before you join, you're going to have to sign this disclosure statement. What conflicts do you have? Again, weeding out that potential board member that has a significant conflict that could cause a problem for the board, and asking them maybe to serve in another aspect. If your board is elected, make sure that the voters and the nominating committee are aware of the conflict of interest policy. So they may have someone in mind for the board that they think is a wonderful person and would be great for the organization, and that may be true. But if there's a significant conflict, that person really shouldn't be on the board, and making those voters and that nominating committee aware of that just avoids those issues down the road. And then, like we mentioned before, make sure that your board fills out those disclosure statements, they sign them, that it's done annually, that those are reviewed annually and processed according to the conflict of interest statement. Now, there's several types of conflict of interest, and I've kind of divided them up into three categories. The first one is financial conflicts, of course. If any board member has a financial interest in a vendor or supplier company that we would potentially be using for our organization, that's a conflict. If our board members are receiving any gifts from any vendors, contractors, or suppliers, and we're talking about significant gifts, we're not talking about the cookies that come at holiday time. We're talking about a significant gift that would influence that board member's decision making when it comes to making decisions regarding that business relationship with a nonprofit. Any board members who have intellectual property, patents, licenses, or copyrights that may be relevant to our organization should not be a board member. That's a conflict of interest. And then, of course, personal loans to the organization or personal loans to vendors and suppliers could influence a board member's decision making regarding the use of that supplier or how the use of funds, those kinds of things. Again, some of these can be mitigated by making sure that that board member who's going to provide the personal loan is not involved in the discussion or the vote of whether to take out that personal loan and what the terms are. And highly recommend that that's in writing and everything documented in the board minutes. Another set of conflicts are business conflicts. So if a board member or their family members have a business that provide goods or services to the nonprofit organization, that's a conflict. And this happens a lot with consulting. This is why, like many attorneys or CPAs who are on the board provide the work that they do pro bono. And if it is very extensive, there comes a point where that board member can no longer provide that pro bono, then we need to go look for a professional outside of our board member and actually pay them a negotiated rate. So that, a business conflict. Board members with a significant investment in a business that provides goods or services. So maybe they're not the owner or make a lot of decisions, but for them, this is a significant investment in this, say, janitorial company that comes in and cleans our offices. That's a conflict of interest when discussing what we're going to do with that janitorial contract. Board members with professional relationships with vendors or suppliers. Maybe in their own business, they have a relationship with a vendor or supplier that they want to recommend to our nonprofit for us to use. Again, that board member really needs to excuse themselves from the discussion and the voting on whether to use that vendor or supplier just because of their business relationship that they have outside of the nonprofit. Board members with access to confidential information. Just having access to confidential information that could be perceived as a conflict, that this information may have a significant impact on our operations. And they may not be able to disclose what the confidential information is, but they would have to eliminate themselves from the discussions, the voting on topics that affect this confidential information that they may have. It's a really tricky one, so we want to avoid those types of relationships. So if we've got somebody coming onto the board that has access to this type of information, maybe they aren't the best candidate for our organization, or we have to know what topics that this board member can't participate in. And that kind of limits some things that the board can do. So maybe best to avoid, but that's a decision that you and your board have to make and address that in your conflict of interest policy. So the third category is personal conflicts. These all kind of seem related, and because sometimes it's hard to separate financial, business, and personal. So again, we're talking about board members with a personal or family relationship to a vendor, a supplier, or a perceived conflict. So maybe somebody's spouse is a consultant that we're thinking about using for some reason or another, or somebody's spouse is an employee of a supplier, a contractor, or consulting firm. Those are the kinds of things we need to be looking at. Board members with political activities that could create an appearance of conflict. I'm not saying that board members can't be politically active, but they have to be very careful about where they're politically active because they are perceived to be representing at all times that they're on the board this organization. And how does that work? If there's an appearance of a conflict, that board member shouldn't probably be on the board, or they're going to have to make a decision between their political activities and being on the board of your organization. And then board members in a key position with a comparable organization. Now, this happens a lot with trade associations where two different associations may be pulling their members from the same industry. Having a board member in a key position on both organizations puts them in a dilemma where they at some point are going to have to make a decision which organization is going to get preferential treatment when we're talking about things between the two. Again, confidential information, that kind of thing. You may have confidential information on one and not the other. So we're trying to avoid board members who have key positions in an organization that's very similar to ours. And then not only like maybe board members on both organizations, but maybe we have a board member who is participating in fundraising efforts for a quote rival organization. Again, that's a conflict of interest for that board member. We're diverting funds to this other organization, but yet they're a board member, and one of their duties as a board member is to raise money for our organization. So that's a conflict probably that's a no-no. We're not going to do those. Those aren't things that we can step back from and say, okay, you just aren't included in this vote. This is one of those things that it's going to say, choose one or the other type of thing. So I wanted to let you know, we have some great samples of conflict of interest policies. One is from Board Source, one is from Harbor Compliance. And if you're interested in getting a copy of those, I've got Word documents. Just leave something in the comments and we will make sure that you get those Word documents. Another thing I wanted to mention, on the National Council of Not-for-Profits website, they list 27 states with codes of conduct or best practices for nonprofit organizations. And these codes of conduct include conflict of interest policies. Some of them are language or different things that you need to be aware of that you can incorporate into your own conflict of interest policy so that you're complying with state requirements. So check out those websites for your state. And I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about this topic or any other topics, please let us know in the comments below. Of course, we always appreciate your likes. And thank you for joining me today. Remember, creating a bigger impact starts with stopping the nonsense. If you're dealing with nonsense in your nonprofit organization, we'd love to help you cut through the noise.